want you to analyze two statements here and see what you think about them, and maybe see which one of them might expose your way of thinking, okay? So here's one guy who says, those people at church, you will not believe what they have done. I just don't understand them. Okay, that's statement one. Here's another statement. We've got some important things going on with the church. We're praying that God will bless us. You see a difference in those two statements? One of them, of course, is talking about they and them, referring to the church, it's they and them. The other statement, referring to the church, is talking about we and us. Which one of those two statements would you be most likely to make? The bottom line question is, how do you view the church? Do you view it as a separate thing from you, or do you see yourself as a part of the whole? That's really important. And of course, that latter way of thinking is the way that we should think. We have a responsibility. We are a part of the local body of Christ. If we're to work efficiently, if we're to fulfill our duties to one another, then we have got to see ourselves as a part of the whole. And we want to talk about that a little bit tonight. And we want to use as our text for study the one that Joseph read earlier from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. You may want to turn your text there. We'll spend most of our time right there in that text tonight as we talk about something that we mentioned this morning. In our lesson this morning, we talked about making certain resolutions for action in the new year. And one of the resolutions we offered was that we should be thinking of how to encourage one another and how to build one another up. And it ought to be a priority for us. And so for just a few minutes tonight, I want to expand upon that notion that we have this responsibility. If the church is not they and them, if the church is we and us, and I am a part of the bigger whole, then it should be very important for me to think of ways to encourage and build up one another. And that's what Paul says here in this text. We want to talk about that for a few minutes now. I'm going to try to keep my comments brief. There's lots that could be said. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I think the weather's sort of changing on us. It may be good to get out and get home at a reasonable time. And so we'll try to keep the comments brief. But I think it really is an important consideration for us all to think about how we can build up and encourage one another. Thanks for being here tonight. You all, I think, I would describe you all as the diehards. You're the diehards, aren't you? You're the ones who are going to come no matter what, and that's a good thing. And I hope that you are taking that as a compliment. I compliment you for being here on this foul weather night, and we appreciate your diligence for being here. We've got a number of visitors tonight. We're glad that you have come. A lot of our own folks are sick. There's a lot going around. Some of our people are out of town. So it is just good that those of us who are here tonight have the opportunity to be together to what? To encourage and build up one another, right? That's what it's all about. So here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, he introduces this assignment. This is the job that we have. You know, we are to encourage and build up one another. Now, that assignment is not a short-term assignment. That's not something that you do in a few minutes and then you've finished it, you've accomplished it. You remember back when we were in school, you know, the teacher would give some assignments that you could knock them out in just no time at all. You could be done with that assignment in just a couple of minutes. But then the teacher sometimes gave some really long-term assignments, you know, that you have to work on all through the school term and turn it in at the end. Those took a lot more determination and attention. Well, this is one of those long-term assignments. We're not going to get over it by just doing a couple things for a few minutes. This is something that we're going to have to work at and work at for a long, really an indeterminate time. As long as we're here and as long as we're part of the local body, we have to be working to encourage and build up one another. Let's read this text one more time. And then just sort of dissect it and see the things that Paul mentions here as ways in which to accomplish this assignment. Therefore, encourage one another and build up one another, just as you also are doing. But we request of you, brethren, that you appreciate those who diligently labor among you and have charge over you in the Lord and give you instruction, and that you esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Live in peace with one another. And we urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with all men. See that no one repays another with evil for evil, but always seek after that which is good for one another and for all men. This is the New American Standard Version, by the way, if you're wondering what translation that is. So how do we go about this job? I want you to see that first phrase there as the assignment. The job that we have to do. How do we accomplish that? Well, I think he goes on to describe that. First of all, he says, appreciate those who diligently labor among you and have charge over you in the Lord and give you instruction, and that you esteem them very highly in love because of their work. And so the first thing that he suggests as a way to encourage and build up one another is to appreciate and esteem those who are over you. Now, that's interesting when you think about it. He's obviously here, I think, talking about the elders of a local congregation. It's the same kind of terminology that you find in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17, where it talks about those who are over you in the body. And so clearly I believe he's talking about the elders here. Now this is a curiosity. Why would how I treat the elders, why would that have impact on others to build them up and encourage them? How does my relative relationship with the elders of the local body affect others? Well, if you think about that for a minute, you realize that that can be true. Let me suggest a different scenario. Here's a mother and a father, and they are at one another like cats and dogs. I mean, they are fighting and bickering. The hatred can almost be cut with a knife. And then there's some children in the family. Well, the father's real good to the children. And the mother's real good to the children too. But the mother and father are at each other just constantly. You think that won't affect the children in that home? The children will be negatively impacted because the parents aren't treating one another the way they should. And I want to suggest to you that's the kind of thing we see here. So, what about the elders? I always mention this whenever I mention elders. Ever since I've been appointed one of the elders here, I feel a little, I don't intend this to be self-serving when I talk about the elders and the relationship with elders. But he says to appreciate them and to esteem them. So we need to recognize the importance. Notice he says, do this because of their work. Appreciate them and esteem them because of their work. See this as a valuable role in the local church. This doesn't necessarily mean that, the elders are perfect or that they make every right judgment. But the work that's being done, the job of elders over local churches is very important. It needs to be appreciated and it needs to be seen as highly valuable. And so, if the members of the church are submissive to the elders, if they are working well with the elders, then that can serve as a positive boost to others. And so here's a member of the church and he's kind of observing, how do the other members of the church relate to the elders? Well, they seem to appreciate the elders. They seem to hold them in high regard. They esteem them. That's a good thing. And so this person is encouraged by seeing what the others do relative to the elders. Now, on the other hand, let's take a different scenario. Here's a Christian who is constantly griping and complaining and quarreling with the elders. Here's a Christian who is gossiping about the elders behind their backs and saying all kinds of negative and hateful things. What does that do? Well, it does a lot of things, but one thing it does is discourage fellow members, right? That discourages and tears down. And so the first point that Paul makes here in regards to how can we encourage and build up one another is seek to maintain a right relationship with the leadership of the local congregation. And see that the work that is assigned to elders is extremely important work. And you need to see that and appreciate that and understand that. Now, speaking concerning specific individual elders, they obviously, we all, Monty and Gordon and I, we have our weaknesses and our failings and our flaws. But the office of elders and the work that's given elders to do is valuable and important. And if you sense that, like you should, and if you relate to the leadership in a positive way, that tends to encourage and build up everybody. That's what Paul is saying there. There's a lot more that can be said about the relationship that churches and elders have, but that's an important thing. Secondly, he goes on to say, live in peace with one another. Peace is not accidental. So if you are in a local congregation and it's a peaceful local congregation, do not imagine that just happens by chance. That's something that you have to work at, right? And we've often mentioned in in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 3. Ephesians 4, verse 3, Paul says, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. You've got to work at that. And so if the local congregation is going to be peaceful, then you have to put forth the effort to do that. And that does not mean, by the way, that you can have the attitude wherein you say, I'll be at peace with others as long as they do everything my way. You know, we don't always get everything our way, right? There's a lot of judgments. We're not talking about doctrine here, but in matters of judgment, we need to be submissive. 1 Peter 5, verse 5, ye younger, submit yourselves to the elder. Yea, all of you be subject one to another, and be clothed with humility. For God resisteth the proud and giveth grace to the humble. And so again, it's not my way. It'll be peaceful if everything is done just the way I like it to be done. No, in matters of judgment, we need to be submissive to one another. We need to make peace a priority and work at it, because would you agree with me? Because some of you probably have experiences like mine in other places and in other times when local congregations were not at peace. I'm going to tell you, that's a very discouraging thing. When the local congregation is not at peace, that doesn't build anybody up. But when we do have a peaceful relationship, that's very positive and encouraging. So work for that. Make it a personal goal to do what you can to maintain the peace within the local congregation. So again, remembering that first phrase in this text, which assigns us this job, encourage and build up one another, he goes on to say, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, and help the weak. I've just entitled this, give necessary and appropriate help. And we can sort of take those one at a time. Admonish the unruly. So if there's a Christian in the local congregation that is not being faithful to the Lord, not living right, not doing what they should, one of the things that I am called upon to do as another member of the local body, is admonish the unruly. Sometimes you have to just plainly tell people that they are wrong. And this is necessary if you're going to build them up. This Christian who's engaged in stuff he shouldn't be doing needs to be told so. Because if he's not told so, he'll continue in that. But if he's warned, if he's admonished, hopefully he'll turn from that, and he himself will be built up. But the very fact that this unruly one now has been turned from his unruliness is an encouragement to everybody else as well. So you don't build up the local body by ignoring situations wherein Christians aren't doing the right thing. Those who are unruly need to be admonished. The prayer and hope is that they will repent. That's good for them. They're built up, and it's good for all the rest of us too. We're encouraged to see that when one who has not been doing right begins to do right. So admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted. This, as I said, is the New American Standard Version that uses the word faint-hearted. The King James Version uses the word feeble-minded. I got to believe that's a word that's drastically changed in many. If I described somebody as feeble-minded, I think you would think of somebody who's probably lacking in mental capacity, right? He's feeble-minded. This word, I think the New American Standard is better. Faint-hearted. This is a person who has been sort of worn down from long and hard battles. This is a person who's been struggling, working hard, and things haven't been going well. This is a person who's just tired, who's had to deal with all kinds of issues. What do you do with someone who's just had to fight through all kinds of issues in their spiritual life? Well, you encourage them, right? You admonish the unruly, but this person is trying hard, but just being beat down and worn down by all he has to deal with. You encourage the faint-hearted. And then he says, help the weak. The weak person here is not the person who's weak physically, although we certainly want to be mindful of those who have physical needs and necessity. But this is talking about spiritual things, right? And so here is a person who's just weak spiritually. They're not necessarily acting in an unruly fashion like the first group that he identified. This is a person who's just weak, not strong spiritually. You've got to help them. And the fact of the matter is that sometimes you have to help and keep helping. I think too often we have the idea that I'll help them, but if they don't do better right now, and I'm going to write them off. I'll give them one chance, one strike and you're out, so to speak. No, sometimes we just have to keep helping. Some of you older folks here will remember Brother Granville Taylor, who's passed away a number of years ago. But I've never forgotten a thing that he said about some folks who were weak. And he said, and the specific case that he was describing is some people who had been helped over and over and over again. And he said, sometimes there's just people who have to be helped. And his point was that you don't draw a line and say, okay, I'm only going to do it this long, I'm only going to do it this many times. Some people just need help. And pretty much you just keep helping, right? And so help the weak. Admonish the unruly. Encourage the faint-hearted. Help those who are weak. He says, be patient with all men. I think this connects to the previous point. So in regards to helping all men, or helping the weak rather, sometimes that just takes a measure of patience. We could use the synonym long-suffering. Sometimes we just have to be long-suffering. As we said, some will need help again and again and again. Unfortunately, there are some Christians who have the attitude of one time and then it's over. I'll help you once, but no more. Those kind of people are not patient. In fact, those are the kind of people who are actually looking for a fight, There are some people who sort of, we use the expression, walking around with a chip on their shoulder, just waiting for somebody to knock the chip off their shoulder so they can break out in a brawl. Well, there's some people, sadly, in local churches that are that way. They're not patient. They're not long-suffering. And they're ready to draw a line and start a fight at a moment's notice. Don't be that way. I don't tell you, people who have that mindset are not building up and encouraging others. If we're going to build up and encourage one another, we're going to have to be patient. Every one of us has our unique flaws and limitations and so forth. We have to be patient with one another and keep working and encouraging and helping. He says, see that no one repays another evil for evil. Don't be vengeful. The word vengeful is actually a really ugly word. But unfortunately, and I'm afraid that you probably have experienced this among Christians from time to time, and hopefully not here at College View, but in other places perhaps where you've been, where people are just determined to get even with one another. That brother, he slighted me. That brother, he insulted me. That brother, he did me wrong. And I'll tell you, I'm going to get even with him. It may not be this week or next, but sooner or later I'll have my chance, and he's going to pay for what he did to me. Is anybody encouraged by that? Does that mindset encourage anyone or build them up? And I think the answer is obviously not. If we're going to build up one another, then we have to put the whole idea of revenge away. So yes, you will be slighted from time to time. Yes, it may be that, maybe unintentionally, but it may be that someone says something that insults you or hurts you in some way. We're not perfect people here. We're going to have to be, as we just said, patient with one another. And then if you think that something has happened that wrongs you, don't seek revenge. You seek to resolve it, but certainly don't be vengeful. And then finally he says, always seek after that which is good for one another and for all men. I think that's a great expression to end this text on. Always seek after that which is good for one another and for all men. Now, remember, again, this is all in association with this broader assignment. Encourage and build up one another. You know, it's a really encouraging thing to me if I am absolutely confident that you all are always seeking to do that which is good for me. Whatever that may be that I need at the moment. It's a very encouraging thing for me to think I've got a church full of people who care and who really want what's best for me. That's an encouraging thing. Every Christian in the local church needs to feel that way. Every Christian needs to feel that these people have my back. These people are watching out for me. These people want what's best for me. That's encouraging, isn't it? Now, we all have an assignment, therefore, that we make this known, that we give everybody that feeling that we're constantly seeking that which is for their good. You know, sometimes we talk about the Greek word agape, the love, the word for love of the highest order in the Greek language is agape, which seeks the best for the object of the love, right? So if you have agape love for someone, then you are seeking what's best for them, even if that means sacrificing yourself in order to ensure what's good for them. This phrase here almost sounds like that definition, doesn't it? Always seek after that which is good for one another and for all men. I would argue that this statement is actually instructing or commanding us to have agape love for one another. The word's not in the text, but the notion is there, I believe. If we have that kind of love for one another, we will encourage and build up one another. Well, just some thoughts. I thought that might be an appropriate follow-up to our study this morning, wherein we were talking about some things to make as resolutions for the new year, and one of them was to consciously work to encourage our brethren. This text gives us that assignment. That, by the way, is not an optional thing. In other words, that's not so, well, yeah, well, I'm going to leave that to others. Others can take care of building up and encouraging. I'm just not a builder-upper. I'm not an encourager. I'll leave that there. No, that doesn't work, does it? This is an assignment for us all. And I think that text then not only gives the assignment, but then gives several positive ways that can be accomplished. Thanks for your attention to what we've had to say. Tried to be a little brief. I don't know if I did it or not, but hopefully some things there that will be a help to us as we seek this priority of building up and encouraging one another. We're going to sing a song of invitation. As we sing this song, make sure your life is right with God. If it's not, and if we can help in any way, whether it be your initial obedience to the gospel to be baptized into Christ, or if you're a Christian already but in need of the prayers of the saints, if we can help in any way, let us know while we stand and sing. Jesus, and listen, stay
Take his yoke, for he is meek and lowly. Bear his burden, to him turn. He who calleth is the Master holy. He will teach if you will learn. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, lean upon your dear Lord's breast. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, come and I will give you rest. Then his loving tender voice obeying, bear his yoke, his burden take. Find the yoke his hand is on you laying, light and easy for his sake. Ye that labor and are heavy laden, lean upon your dear Lord's breast. Ye that